Judging by the adverse reaction to the recent advertisement announcing the next generation Jaguar, the real message to be portrayed really missed the mark. Aired with the intent of announcing the arrival of the Jaguar 00, its idea or intent was to alert future car buyers to the pending release, not really only of the Jaguar 00, but the new upbeat format for its sports car range. The primary cause of concern was the fact that there was no image of the car in the ad, so what was the point? Not even Elon Musk could fathom that one. But those at Jaguar didn't really mind. In reality, the ad was more about awareness creation and update to the ongoing reinvention of both JLR's car range and the company and its image. At least that was my interpretation of it. The ad was merely the tip of the iceberg where only 10% of the ice is visible above the waterline. Those less concerned with cars and more interested in corporate strategy will, I hope, appreciate what's happening below the waterline. There's a far greater number of people that don't get it though, and that could be a problem. Instead of promoting the brand, it was widely thought that the ad was threatening the brand's image, thereby running the risk of turning people away rather than attracting them. An example of this view is YouTuber Harry's Garage. Harry proclaimed, "Current Jag owners will be embarrassed rather than impressed." He was not alone in his thoughts. The fact that the ad has been viewed 3.6 million times on YouTube, though, and many more conversations and articles have followed, you'd have to think that the underlying branding strategy was in fact a success. For the strategy practitioners anyway, and marketers, and leaders, and owners, there's no such thing as bad publicity. The impending relaunch of the Jaguar brand in its entirety is now widely known and hopefully enthusiastically anticipated by Jaguar owners' new target market. So, whilst the threat to existing clients was worried about, it's those in the bracket 1 or even 2 ratchets above their existing clientele that Jaguar are now trying to target. At the end of the day, however, Jaguar is really caught between a rock and a hard place. It enjoys an iconic status in the industry thanks to the famous E-Type, but that car was axed way back in the mid-1970s. Since then, its reputation has been tarnished because of less favourable quality, a lack of real differentiation, and a lack of imagination overall. In contrast, incumbents in its desired market, Bentley, Porsche and Aston Martin, have a strong presence, excellent reputations and longevity on their side. Potentially, therefore, the transformation is a huge leap of faith. There's a real risk, though, that the entire reinvention could go wrong, and that is the problem. Jaguar has committed 15 billion UK pounds to the transformation project. It's going to be conducted over 5 years. This has necessitated interim closures of 2 production plants, result being that only 1 car is still being produced, the Jaguar F-Pace. The critical question concerning this leap of faith then is, can Jaguar deliver the intended outcomes on the somewhat vague promise made in the ad? Whilst I can't possibly provide a definitive answer, I can speculate with you and I can provide insight. Who am I to judge? My name is Paul Hunter. I am an independent researcher, author and deliverer of content designed to enhance the practice of corporate strategy. As a professional nudger, my source of energy is my passion for the understanding and practice of the social sciences that cover strategy, strategic thinking, leadership and leadership development, personal and organisational psychology. I chose this topic for a podcast because I think that everyone can benefit from the boldness and commitment demonstrated by JLR in its transformation agenda, but also within a world that is subject to huge disruption. Titled Project Reimagine, their journey isn't just about them. It's an activity that every automotive company in the world is engaged in one form or another. Other examples of this kind of disruption in the automotive industry abound. Examples are the touted merger of Honda and Nissan, the arrival of Chinese-built EVs into global markets, and the decline of the auto giant Volkswagen, particularly in China. Other examples from a different industry are BP and Shell, each of whom backed away from initial transformation plans that would have seen them becoming green energy providers alone in an effort to step away from fossil fuel production. Ultimately, of course, companies in all industries are fighting the impact of environmental change from numerous sources that I don't need to articulate here, and they'll be different for each industry. From an academic perspective, there is no single methodology that defines the perfect transformation, nor is there any clear initiating or starting point. I guess you just have to know when you know. Quite often that's too late, in the sense that there's a differentiation between adaptation and invention, and that'll be the subject of a separate podcast. There are, however, combinations of methodologies and experience that can be seen at JLR, and that's why it's useful for us to use JLR as a comparative example in this podcast. I'll start with a situation analysis, followed by a strategic analysis, each contributing to a conclusion and a discussion around the question we raised previously: can Jaguar deliver the intended outcomes of the somewhat vague premise made in the ad? So what is their current position? Project Reimagine is a carefully plotted strategic roadmap that the company website suggests will transform JLR into a sustainable, modern luxury business. Sounds great, but that vision and associated messages broadcast in the ad suppose that JLR does not consider itself to be sustainable, modern, or luxurious. But that is where it needs to be, so it is aiming for a much higher goal, even if the decision risks upsetting the customers it has today. A bold and brave assumption and decision indeed. Taking a company-wide perspective, it's apparent that there is quite a disparity between the Jaguar and Land Rover brands too. While Jaguar has to play catch-up, its counterparts over at Land Rover have been engaged in a continual journey of renewal for many years. Let's have a look at the history of each to provide insight and clarification. Jaguar was founded in 1922 as an independent sports car company, but didn't become the Jaguar Car Company until 1935. The brand peaked in March 1961, following the launch of the legendary Jaguar E-Type. The run of success of this model lasted until February 1975, when the technology, design and costs made it uncompetitive. The E-Type wasn't the only car in its portfolio. Its history lay in a number of racing and sports cars before the E-Type, as well as a number of reasonably well-respected sedans. The Jaguar Car Company itself has a checkered history of ownership, as does Land Rover, which we'll look at in a minute. Jaguar was bought and sold by commodity-focused car manufacturers including British Motor Holdings and British Leyland, before it was floated as an independent company again. But this made it highly attractive to all comers, including Ford Motor Company, which ended up acquiring it in 2000. In contrast, Land Rover, established in 1947, when an English automotive and aeronautical engineer, Maurice Wilks, sketched the design of a four-wheel drive multi-purpose vehicle in the sand of a Welsh beach. It was unusual because the sketch depicted a rugged off-road vehicle, which was ultimately marketed as a utilitarian four-wheel drive workhorse. Its quality and reliability was so strong, for its time, that the brand was able to capture the tide of change, which ultimately saw the Land Rover acting as a farm vehicle and also an all-terrain vehicle for use in the armed services, which I believe is still in use today. Over the years, it evolved into the luxury Range Rover that we know and love today. Somewhere along the way, too, it had a strong influence on the emergence of the modern sports utility vehicle, in fact the entire market for SUVs. Land Rover ownership was also varied and also included British Leyland, as well as British Aerospace, BMW, and again Ford. In 2008, Tata Motors, an Indian company, acquired Land Rover and Jaguar from Ford, forming the topic of our discussion today. That is, the Jaguar Land Rover Corporation. Today, sales of cars from the Land Rover business are thriving. The product range includes Range Rovers, Discoveries and Defenders. So successful is Land Rover that it is virtually funding the entire Jaguar transformation. Where Jaguar, on the other hand, is not thriving, hence the focus of Project Reimagine. While this project is company-wide, the focus for Land Rover is on a reduction of costs, overall, manufacturing and other, while at the same time improving reliability and, importantly, quality. For Jaguar, the transformation is all about upscaling its market position and enhancing operational performance before emerging side by side with Land Rover in a position of continual, harmonious transformation and renewal. This state of progressive transformation and evolution is a hallmark that Land Rover has well and truly captured. Each new release of the Range Rover in particular represents a superb upscaling of the previous model. For Jaguar, however, Project Reimagine is all about learning from Land Rover and the adoption of their approach to business. It starts with the reinvention of the brand, hence the notorious advertisement, and a commitment to embrace the Range Rover ethos. JLR stated its objective with Project Reimagine is grounded in the adoption of sustainability. That's on its website, which it suggests is at the heart of everything we do. Interestingly, Jaguar has adopted its own version of Project Reimagine, which, as we have suggested, is a little more radical than Land Rover's. They've named it Project Raw, rather apt for a Jaguar. But they aim to deliver double-digit EBIT margins by 2026 and net cash positive outcomes by financial year 25. Key objectives: modernisation and luxury, electrification, sustainability, enterprise transformation, and global collaboration. The rite of passage is leverage from the iconic Jaguar brand, although it enters very murky waters, having enacted a new look for its logo, which incorporates different font and style, the new Jaguar 00, which in reality is a metaphor for what the leaders of Jaguar want it to become, more than actually, I guess even in my mind, a real car. Let's take a strategic analysis of the project now and see what we can conclude, because from a strategic perspective, the purpose of Project Raw is to allow Jaguar to transform, both physically and mentally. Physically, in terms of cost efficiency, effectiveness, quality, and representation. Mentally, though, from perceptions of ordinary, non-sustainable, unreliable cars, with a troublesome reputation for poor quality, an underwhelming idea of luxury, to the extent that things just have to change. The enormity of change, however, is remarkable in its depth, breadth, and cost. In Project Raw, the necessary investment will support the development of electric, autonomous, AI, and digital technologies, as well as the transformation of JLR manufacturing and other operating expenses. Jaguar is also focusing on its brand as it looks to leverage that into market segments well known to us today, but not those where they currently have a presence. The ambition for Jaguar specifically is to focus only on luxurious electric cars that will offer benefits and features at a standard that fits underneath brands in the highest levels such as Bentley, Porsche and Aston Martin. No doubt they are imagining further transformation to the full-blown driverless version of the car of the future, but we don't know. So where does that lead us? While that strategy is acceptable for the next 5 years or so, the longer-term outlook may not be so peachy. There's a lot going on in the wider world of the planet and other areas, and that will have significant consequences for Jaguar and indeed the industry in its entirety. The problem for everyone in business is that industrialization is at a tipping point. Let me reframe that. The opportunity for everyone in business is that industrialisation is at a tipping point. I'll let you decide which one you're going to adopt. Industrial activity, though, is nearing the pointy end of change in areas of technology, societal norms, and a reversal of globalisation. Maybe not in fact, but at least in philosophy. Worth throwing in here the observation too that this digitalisation, this technological change, was underway for 12 years before it even became a thing in the late 2016s, 18, 19s, just before the 2020. At the same time, forces from climate change, disease, geopolitics are also exerting lasting pressure on strategic decision making. Again, you'll be familiar with each of those and the concern and combined effect on the automotive industry, but that alone makes long-term decision-making more risky and more difficult. Projections and scenarios developed by PHSNL's, that's my consulting firm's research arm, the Strategic Management Institute, recognises that advances in technology are highly likely to enable the evolution of microsystems, emerging in the form of entities such as smart cities, circular economies, and integrated industry-oriented systems, so microsystems. Examples are smart health, smart houses, integrated mobility, again in the form of a microsystem. In the context of mobility, we expect that car companies will evolve into integrated corporate collaborative systems. This is a different perspective. The technology is available to do it. Examples are in existence today, and that again is a subject for another podcast. So these microsystems will incorporate many related parties, we understand, which will be intertwined in one large operation where all members share the same level of the spoils. Primary driver of such systems will be the owners of each system. Instead of taking a clip of the ticket each time a raw material, component, transport company and retailer touches the product, investors in the system will share the profits as if it were only one company. In other words, we're cutting out the middlemen. All participants in the system will seek to optimize efficiency and effectiveness for all the system rather than as one member of the system. As a mobility system, members will include a much broader range of members, organisations, maybe an organisation as one. It could include battery charging stations, it could include hotels, it could include airlines. Who knows? The beauty with it is individual investors can come and go. Companies will be set up to run portfolios of such systems rather than portfolios of business units. The rub is that while these may not be in existence in 5 years' time, they could well be in full swing in 10 years' time, and the new Jaguar won't be launched for another 2 years. Of course, this is purely conjecture. Keep in mind, however, that Ford has recognised the idea of a mobility system as part of its 2021 strategy, where the company was committed to advancing mobility solutions which focuses on developing innovative transportation services and technologies to enhance urban mobility and address the evolving needs of consumer. Since then, the demand for EV vehicles has declined a little bit, maybe a lot, in which case in 2024 Ford revised its industrialisation strategy. It made a decision to move away from that ambitious autonomous vehicle plan towards instead an investment in software and services related to connected vehicles and fleet management. Now that's actually not a big difference, because whereas the focus on the car has slackened a little, we're now looking at interactivity between cars. And at one stage, it was suggested that blockchain would enable one brand of car to communicate with another brand of car, Toyota and Ford, for example, on the highway, thereby improving safety. So we're still looking at a fully integrated system in operations, and we'll see what happens at a company-wide level. Ultimately, though, at Ford, back to them, the mobility division was integrated back into the commercial and government division, signaling a stronger emphasis on commercial customers with this advanced technology. So there we have it again. Ford are looking to higher volume in commercial applications than consumer applications. Overall, this meant that the more broad-based collaborative approach was put on hold, but again for cars, not for their network. Nevertheless, the Ford experience suggests the value of electrification is strong. So its primary advantage is in integrated software solutions that realize most gains in more commercial, complex mobility spaces. And this is the antithesis of the Jaguar philosophy, which is grounded in a promise of copy nothing, a bit like Apple, develop its own integrated microsystem. And I think that's where there is a high degree of risk. Why? Well, Jaguar could end up creating an EV that only Jaguar customers can access, making for very low volumes and by definition, very high costs. By going it alone, Jaguar could end up suffering the same challenge that all automotive companies face at the moment, where outsourcing in the 1990s led in the 2020s to a problem where they had no integrated technology at all. Seat providers, dashboard providers, braking providers all had their own technology, their own software to manage those components. The car companies didn't. So it's still playing catch up in that space. Then we need to look at the competitive environment. Here, Jaguar is targeting Bentley, Porsche, and Aston Martin as examples of the market they would like to be in, but pricing just underneath those cars. However, each of those have considerable advantages over Jaguar Land Rover in the following way. Bentley and Porsche are part of the Volkswagen Group. It owns numerous brands and consequently realises significant economies of scale in the operation of a high-volume EV fleet, which is compounded when we look at the issues we just discussed in terms of inter-car connectivity and so on. The other competitor, Aston Martin, has gone the other way. So here we have an example of what I was just saying. But they are much stronger than Jaguar. Aston Martin have a strong brand. Their strategy is to take a deliberate and measured approach to electrification, balancing the need to embrace new technologies with a desire to preserve its brand heritage, and the objective being to nurture its existing customer base. So there's a momentum behind Aston Martin that isn't behind Jaguar right now, and timing is everything in this space. I would worry that Jaguar is just a little late. And so we can conclude overall that the only visible difference between Jaguar 00 and images of any other sports car in 2026 is the size of the proposed investment. While the Land Rover range are already at the same level as Bentley, Porsche and Aston Martin, Jaguar is playing catch up. With regard to the 00 especially, competitors already offer or are close to an offer of aerodynamic slope roofs, EV energy packs, bright colours, advanced technologies. Yep, 4 wheels, no spare. That's the problem with cars. They're metal boxes on wheels and on it goes. A car is a car. So why am I so dismissive? It seems that the real story in Project Reimagine is the continuation of the successful Land Rover brands and a repositioning of the Jaguar brand in the form of a catch-up. There is glitz and there is glamour, but when playing catch-up, it is easy to miss the longer perspectives of the future of mobility. So there's a mindset there that is out of lockstep with what's actually going on. And let's have a look at that. It's to do that, though. It's essential to look beyond the industry level forces of change and look at what's going on in the big bad world, the broader environment. And it's significant. Let's say 2030. 5 years from now, to understand what might be happening then, we can look back 5 years and see the amount of change that's taken place. The standout automotive company in that era, so that's 5 years ago, it's an environment where Tesla had only just become the world's largest automaker by market capitalization, at least, which was July 1, 2020, when it surpassed Toyota's market capitalization of $202 billion. Impressive, but it was the only EV in the market. So it has unbelievable innovation, but it doesn't have a lot of diversification. The entry point for Jaguar and differentiation other than EVs and a bit of advanced technology. So the entry point for Jaguar 00 is right in the middle of a time now when nearly all cars will be EVs, so differentiation will be even more difficult. But that's then not the only real issue. It's the fact that by 2030, EVs could well be active members of established integrated mobility systems. It could also be the time when the world will have reached peak climate change, not to mention advanced forms of AI, the Internet of Things, blockchain, crypto, and augmented reality. How much demand will there be in that environment, given the Gen Z, I think, doesn't even buy cars anymore? How much demand will there be for these luxury sports cars with only 2 seats? I don't know, but equally it doesn't seem to present as a factor in JLR's thinking, or more importantly, its investment program, as far as I can tell. Of course, this is only based on external information, publicly available information, which was a lot going on that we aren't privy to. There again, there's also hydrogen as a viable alternative to electric energy, and that is a reality. Toyota has a long-held philosophy that commits it to hydrogen, and BMW will soon be releasing a hydrogen car, the iX5. So, not far behind, it expects the world's most powerful passenger car fuel cell system supported by a dedicated battery pretty soon. It's planned for launch in 2028. It's been tested and it's looking pretty good. But I think that actually reflects then the overall idea that you don't have only one energy source, you have a mix. Again, we won't go into that now. So JLR can be seen to have bet the farm on Reimagine. It sounds good. I think certainly very promising and positive, and hats off to them. Highly constructive, bold and brave. But is it enough? I asked the question in the context of that luxury market. And what we're seeing there is that some companies are moving to a situation where they can develop bespoke cars. So this is way beyond what Jaguar are looking at. They're looking at the cheapest version of the top class model. At the very top, Rolls-Royce recently announced an investment program exceeding 300 million UK pounds to extend its bespoke manufacturing facility at Goodwood. So it will not just modify its existing range for a client, it will design and build a Rolls-Royce for its client. And as part of the BMW group, hydrogen could well be a part of that story. So what's emerging is, at the luxury level, is bespoke cars. Again, JLR is focusing on re-establishing high volume, certainly high value, high brand cars, but the market is potentially, at least in some parts of the luxury vehicle market, moving in a different direction. Well, perhaps it's a good time now to go and revisit the question we asked in the start of the podcast, and that was, can Jaguar deliver the intended outcomes on the somewhat vague promise made in the ad? I think we've confirmed that when working with Land Rover, an organisation that has thrived on the basis of continual renewal, it shouldn't be too hard at the end of the day for Jaguar to adopt the same approach. At the end of the day, too, it seems to have the commitment to pull through. It aired I suppose, not risky, but certainly out there ad to support their cause. It was released halfway through the project, so they're confident they're going to complete it. But more importantly, strategy and strategy implementation is all about that human element, maybe 90%. If the team can pull together, if the objectives are realizable, if there is sufficient support from those who have interests and are concerned with the project, that is, have a skin in the game, then there's a pretty good chance that any project will succeed. It's a strength of leadership and a strength of followership. Jaguar, combined with Land Rover, has that. And I'm going to back them and suggest they will deliver. However, what it is they deliver, I'm not sure. There is a lot of angst about the design of that car, but it was put out there to create discussion and conversation, not necessarily to build. Only time will tell. Let's revisit this podcast in a couple of years' time and see how they ended up. To do that, you'll need to subscribe to this channel, so I invite you to do that right away. Thank you for listening. I've enjoyed giving this podcast. I hope you've enjoyed listening to it as well. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. It'll be out within a month.